Welcome to Mountain Strong. Today I have come back to Flat Top Mountain. It was such a gorgeous day that I decided that I would do a trail up Flat Top Mountain that I had not yet done. I've done the backside of the Flat Top Trail to go up to the third peak, but I hadn't done the most obvious choice of going up the backside of Flat Top Trail to the top of Flat Top. And so it is a really lovely trail. A lot of people had the same idea. Found a very full parking lot and coming up here, and there's a lot of people even up here right now, but I'm out of time. The sun is about to set. I didn't realize how quickly the daylight was going to get away from me here today. It's a 4:30 sunset, and so we're rapidly approaching that, but hoping to pump out 4 videos up here and take us through the first 4 of the songs of ascent. So the Psalms of Ascent are, it's one of those times where we are going to pay attention to the heading of the Psalms. We have been ignoring those for the most part up until this point, but there seems to be a purposeful grouping of these Psalms together, a set of 15 Psalms that a lot of people think describe some kind of pilgrimage in going up to the city of Jerusalem. And maybe this was 15 songs that they sang as they were going towards Jerusalem on those feast days that the Jews traveled to Jerusalem for. So we're going to have a look today at Psalm 120. Let's go ahead and read that now. In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. Deliver me, O Lord, from lying lips, from a deceitful tongue. What shall be given to you, and what more shall be done to you, you deceitful tongue? A warrior's sharp arrows, with glowing coals of the broom tree. Woe to me that I sojourn in Meshech, that I dwell among the tents of Kedar. Too long have I had my dwelling among those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. As I think about the beginning of the songs of ascent, or the songs that perhaps were grouped together and were sung as people marched up to Jerusalem, I can't help but think how appropriate this is a theme for God's people today. Because, we sing that song, Marching to Zion, and of course there is a sense in which we are a part of spiritual Jerusalem. We're going to reflect upon that in our next video, I believe. But as we think about it, we are marching towards a heavenly goal. We have a purpose that we are heading towards. And in that purpose, we find ourselves here as strangers and pilgrims. You see that language in 1 Peter especially, strangers and pilgrims, people who don't feel at home where they are. And so being a stranger and a pilgrim, we can identify with this psalm because these people felt as though they were strangers and pilgrims. In verses 5 and 6, it says that they sojourned in Meshech and they dwelt among the tents of Kedar. And those are 2 very different places, one in the far north and one in the far east. And really putting those 2 things together, you get the sense the Jews are saying simply, we live in foreign lands, and you get a sense of perhaps when this took place, perhaps after the dispersion, after captivity, when this psalm perhaps was inspired and written and put into this collection. But they say we dwell far away, and we feel in this place far away that we are strangers. We are among those who hate peace, he says. And among those who hate peace, there's a couple of things that they experienced. They found themselves, first of all, surrounded by lies in verse number 3, but then they find themselves surrounded by war. And they want peace, but they're surrounded by people who want war. Now these lies lead only, in verse 4, to war, to fire, to arrows, and to the glowing coals. You could look at that and say that that's the psalmist wishing these things upon his enemies, or you could look at that and say, well, maybe that's the psalmist describing the logical end of the lifestyle that he sees, in the people round about him. When people are not for peace, they are for war, and that's what they're going to meet. But given that the psalmist is for peace, I can't help but think that maybe this isn't really what he desires for his enemies. And maybe it's just, again, that logical conclusion of the life that they faced. As strangers, like the psalmist, we find ourselves as people who are for peace. And that makes us different in verse 7. I am for peace, but when they speak, it says they are for war. And so what do you do when you're different? What do you do when you actually identify with the fact that you're a stranger, you're a pilgrim, and you don't find yourself at home in this world? Well, you do what the psalmist does here. In verse 2, he calls out to God. And he calls out to God, of course, with the confidence that God hears. He has heard and he will hear this cry for distress. He says in verse 1 that he has heard. And so, again, as you reflect upon the first step in really a journey towards Zion, a journey towards God, realize that in that first step, you have to identify with the fact that you're a stranger. When you realize that you're a stranger, you're not only not going to feel at home, you're going to feel very uncomfortable with what surrounds you. Finding yourself in a world full of war, a world full of lies, you're going to cry out to God. You're going to find in God a God who hears you, who answers your call, and who desires peace just as you do. May God bless you in your journey, and of course, may God bless you today.